Did this game really just make Barry Burton one of my favorite Resident Evil characters of all time? Yes. Yes, it did.
I'll always need you. But for now, I have this.
Resident Evil Revelations 2 was next in the timeline to check out, and given its title and not being part of the mainline series, I assumed that it would have a lot of similarities to the first Revelations game. And in a way it does. It separates itself into 4 episodes of content like the first one did, making it feel more like a mini-series in the presentation, so that's similar enough. But the story is entirely its own thing, and in my personal opinion, I thought this was way better than the first Revelations game. This one was released in 2015 and canonically takes place in between Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6, building upon several of the story elements of 5 and also managing to give great side stories for some of the characters that haven't been seen in quite some time. It basically has 2 stories happening that we shift back and forth from, with each Revelation episode giving us a portion of both stories. The first of the 2 stories stars Claire Redfield, once again with a signature red leather jacket, because without a red jacket, how would we even know it was her? And she's teamed up with a girl named Moira, who is actually the daughter of Barry Burton, the character from the very first Resident Evil game that you have a lot of prominent interactions with in the Jill campaign, several wondering whether or not that you can trust him, having to make decisions about that, and ultimately he does end up on your side after all. And the other story that happens in the game involves Barry himself as a playable character searching for Moira, who's gone missing, and he ends up encountering a little girl named Natalia who becomes his companion for that side of the story. The opening of the game features both Claire and Moira working for TerraSave, an agency trying to prevent various biohazards in the world, when they're suddenly abducted by some mercenaries and awaken inside of a prison cell on a strange island, which immediately calls back to Claire's events in Code Veronica, and she's definitely having some deja vu. Claire is still her typical inquisitive, proactive self, managing to escape and maneuver through the facility fairly easily. And in joining her, Moira is depicted very differently. She's a little bit younger and more angsty and rebellious, and she has a personality quirk where she is constantly swearing, almost every single chance that she gets. But there is a bit of a story reason why that I appreciated, along with the arc that she goes on that allows both her and Barry to develop as characters. She's shown to be very dismissive of her father. She even calls him Barry instead of father, and she also has this aversion to using guns, opting for a crowbar instead. And this is both for story and gameplay purposes. During each segment of the game, you can switch between both characters, kind of similar like how you could in Resident Evil 0, but things are perfected much better here, and the integration of each character's usefulness is a satisfying upgrade. It's a lot like using Claire as the primary character, and you use Moira more for opening doors with a crowbar, discovering items in hidden areas using the flashlight, as well as being able to open these locked crates that give you valuable items. These were a little bit weird because you have to find the right area by the vibrations on the game controller. It took a little bit to get the hang of, but not too bad overall. I was also happy to see that they really did dip back into the horror elements of the franchise quite a bit here. Sure, there's a lot of action with the now traditional over-the-shoulder camera, which seems to be the definitive Resident Evil style of modern times, but the locations are dripping with creepy atmosphere. There's low-light areas, rusted and broken aesthetics of the surrounding areas, screams and moans in the distance where you don't know where they're coming from. We got prison corridors, blood-stained walls, and looks like bodies were dragged across the ground, chains hanging from the ceiling, outdoor forest areas with lots of fog and spooky atmosphere. And I gotta admit, the first jump scare of the game totally got me. The enemies also, though not exactly the traditional T-virus zombies, are the closest we've had to actually getting legitimate zombies back in the game. These were all people that were horribly mutated and transformed by bizarre experimentations happening on the island, but the way that they act and attack are just totally like straight up zombies. And that's something I've really wanted Resident Evil to get back to. Give me more zombies. Although these aren't necessarily traditional Resident Evil zombies, they are close enough for me, and I appreciated that. Basically, all I'm trying to say is, even with all the standard action elements in play here, I'm also very happy to see that a lot of the atmosphere of this game is doing its best to create an immersive horror experience as well. Now, the interesting thing the game does with its story is that the Claire and Moira story actually takes place 6 months before the Barry and Natalia segment. So when it switches back and forth between the two, you get clues about where Claire and Moira may have ended up as Barry searches for them both around the same locations. In a way, it can be a little disappointing that you kind of have to go through the same location twice with Barry, but there is an effort to make the Barry sections different in the fact that he may be going through the location backwards from the previous section, or maybe he gets to go off the beaten path a little bit, or find another route that you didn't get to go on the first time. There is enough done where it doesn't feel like it's overly repetitive. Just like the first Revelations game, you do get a map in the upper right-hand corner that I thought was a godsend at times, and you can also heal yourself with the click of a button that is very useful. This time you have options of crafting materials like bombs made from empty bottles and alcohol or smoke screens. It also autosaves in every area that you reach, which is nice, but autosaving also always makes me very nervous for whatever reason. There's always a suspicious part of my brain that's like, is it really saving right now? Can I trust it? I don't know. Now, out of the two stories that are happening at the same time, I do have to say the Barry segments were my favorite, but you need both for all of the emotional beats to hit home. We always think about the original Spencer Mansion incident of the first Resident Evil game and how important and traumatizing it is to the story, the lore, but specifically to the characters Jill and Chris. But those two were not the only ones to experience the Spencer Mansion, because Barry was there too. And now we finally get to catch up with him and see what's up with him on his search for his daughter, and he has some fantastic character development. You know early on that Moira doesn't really like him, and you know that something happened in their past, but the Barry segments, he's so determined to find his daughter, he's risking everything just on the most limited clues and bits of information that he can get. He's sailing to an island that's filled with infected zombie human creatures and stupid invisible bugs that I can't stand that kill you in one hit if you can't find them. But anyways, he's doing all of this just to rescue Moira. While also on his journey, he meets Natalia on the island, who not so subtly brings out the protective father figure role of him trying to protect her as well. But anyways, the gameplay in this game, I don't really feel there's much to comment on, because it's very similar to the gameplay in Resident Evil 4, 5, and the first Revelations, and I've already talked about that in depth in my other reviews. The added element here is having the partner character that you can switch to that can do extra things like find items you can't, and characters like Moira have the flashlight and crowbar to help you out, or Natalia is able to crouch down and crawl through small areas that Barry can't get through, point out enemies that he can't see, and little things like that. What could have been a really cool feature to the game that they didn't do, and I'm not sure exactly why, is that Claire and Moira have bracelets that track their fear levels. It's there for story purposes, but it doesn't affect the gameplay. It would have been really interesting if you had like a fear meter or something and you had to keep it in check before it goes too far and then you mutate into some creature. But essentially, there's a villain on the island called the Overseer who is watching everything that they do and running their own experiments to find the best possible candidate to steal their body. But it has to be somebody that doesn't experience fear. Shockingly enough, the best suitor for this is Natalia, who I kept thinking in my head was going to turn out to be some secret enemy creature or something, but nope, she is just a horribly traumatized little girl, with the background being that she watched her parents die in the Terra Grigia incident, and so she's kind of blocked out her emotions. And that's also a fun way to bring in the events of Revelation 1, where Terra Grigia was attacked by the Hunters. It also manages to tie in a bit of lore from Resident Evil 5 because the Overseer is actually a Wesker, not Albert Wesker that we know from before, but his, quote, sister, Alex Wesker. Well, she's actually another surviving member of the Wesker Project, something that was put in place by Umbrella's founder, Spencer, as a eugenics experiment to develop advanced humans for his world domination plot. To my understanding, and I still might not have this right, but I believe that the Wesker that we knew was the only one of the project that was successfully integrated with the experiments, whereas Alex was suffering with illness and degenerations, and so she conducted all of these experiments on this island in order to try to find a way to transfer her consciousness into another healthier body, basically gaining eternal life. But things don't go the way that she wanted, and when she first appears in the Barry segment, she is this giant mutated creature with bulging eyes and a terrifying smile, and it really is an awesome monster design here and adds to a lot of the horror elements of the game. Now, I certainly am a sucker for father-son stories, but father-daughter stories can also get me emotional too if done well. And at the end of one of the big boss battles in the Claire and Moira storyline, Claire is pinned down, and Moira, after refusing to use guns the entire time, is now forced to pick one up and deliver the final blow. But the reason she was against guns is because as kids, she found one of Barry's guns and accidentally shot her sister. Now, I honestly thought that they were implying that Moira killed her sister, but no, that's not the case. She just slightly injured her. But the aftermath led Barry to lashing out at her, and that caused the rockiness in their relationship, and they never really reconciled from that moment. And now we have this grieving father searching for one of his little girls, not wanting to lose her, while also protecting another innocent little girl in the process. Barry, you are too good for this world. Also, while playing this game, I had no idea that Moira killing this boss was some kind of choice. I was literally so locked in that I didn't even see the switch character's choice at the top of the screen. I guess there was another ending where if you don't do this, Moira actually dies, but in the good or canon ending of the game, she's supposed to live to the end, so I did it the right way, but I definitely didn't do that with any kind of intention. My one major negative with the game would really have to come towards the end, particularly with the Barry segments. Now, I know I said that the Barry levels were my favorite, and they are, but the last two, particularly the final one, just seems to drag a bit. There's one segment that involves carrying around a crate, trying to make this generator work, and it all feels very tedious. And also the final segment has so many different puzzles involved. Now there's some puzzles throughout the entire game, but it felt like there were a lot towards the end, from figuring out how to move this metal platform around, where you have to constantly switch back and forth between Barry and Natalia to do so, or the part where you have to figure out how to turn off this poison gas that will kill you in just like a minute or so. So it's an experiment of dying over and over again to try to figure out the right path to take and the right things to move, and these kind of puzzles are fine in general, but when you're so close to the ending of the game, they really feel like a nuisance. I really thought I was about to be done with the game, and then you end up in this mansion-like area, and you have to find a bunch of key cards and stuff. It's all standard Resident Evil fare, and it's not like it's terribly difficult, but to me with this, and also kind of how I feel about the last few Resident Evil games that I played, is I always feel like the last hour or two of the game kind of feels like overkill. This might just be a me problem, or it might be that I try to beat these games within a couple of days. I don't know what it is, but it's always like the last hour or two that I just kind of want to get to the end. That's nothing against the quality. Maybe it's just a preference thing that I want the games to be slightly shorter, but I was feeling a little bit exhausted in the final segment here. But anyways, once you get to the final boss, the mutated Alex Wesker, I found out that I couldn't move. No, the game literally glitched and I could not do anything. This is me actually trying to move right now. I tried restarting the fight to do it again. I still couldn't move. I tried maybe just standing there to see if the boss could like hit me out of my frozen state. That didn't work. I had no idea what was going on. Well, apparently this is a common glitch if you play on PC. Similar to the Ouroboros fight from Resident Evil 5, I guess there is just certain issues with some of the Resident Evil games from around this era of time when it comes to the frame rates. I had to look it up online, which I was bummed about because I didn't have to look anything up for this game as I was playing it. Every puzzle, every boss fight, every enemy, I figured it out all myself, and I was so proud of myself until I kept freezing at the final boss. I had no idea what was happening. I had to turn my frame rate down to 30 in order to get it to work for whatever reason. It's just a problem with people that play on PC, I guess. And this was the only part of the game that gave me any issues. Anyways, once I solved that little problem, the boss fight itself was fairly easy. She has obvious weak points, and she tends to prioritize attacking Natalia, so if you can keep your distance and Natalia stays healed, she's not too difficult to take down. I also enjoyed the second part of the fight where Moira shows back up, helping her dad out, and then Claire comes in with the ever-classic rocket launcher, which you get to use from a distance while also playing as Barry up close, swapping back and forth, which is a really fun idea for the final fight.
You held your own out there, Moira.
Of course she did. She's a fucking Burton.
Of course, the biggest question I have is with the final cutscene. It jumps a little further in the future, and Claire is on her way to visit Barry, Moira, his other daughter, and it looks like Natalia that he's now adopted. But Natalia is shown in her room reading some news articles and giving an ominous little smile that might suggest that Alex's consciousness somehow did transfer to her. Not sure how that works exactly. I mean, I know it's all fantasy that we're dealing with here. We're dealing with bioweapons and tyrants and giant monsters, but transferring human consciousness from one body to the other, that seems like it's another level of supernatural that doesn't quite fit in. It also might mean absolutely nothing. Maybe she's just smiling because she's a little silly goose. I have no idea. And I know it's not followed up on because there's no Revelations 3, and none of these characters have been in a game since this one, so I assume that this is just one of those things that we tend to forget about. Or it's just a tease that in case they wanted to go in that direction, they have the opportunity to. But to be honest, I thought Revelations 2 was awesome. Sure, the gameplay is nothing different or special from RE4 and 5, but I like RE4 and 5, so that's fine with me. I like the setting of the island with the prison location and the outdoor areas, the horror locations, the butcher shops, the weird caves with the dolls. It's a great variety of creepy atmosphere. The enemies are great, especially since most of them are straight up zombies. Thank you. And it manages to capture a wonderful story about a father and a daughter reconnecting, using the character of Barry, which is a character that hasn't really been touched on for quite a while. The villain, although a little bit cheesy, as Wesker's sister, it makes enough sense though that she would have the knowledge to do these experiments, and it's kind of interesting how she's a failed version of what the real Wesker turned out to be. It also allows events from RE5 to be mentioned, like the Ouroboros and Wesker, as well as some of the events from Revelations, like Terra Grigia, helping everything feel very connected in continuity. Despite a couple of tedious and exhausting moments towards the end of the game, this definitely turned out to be one of my favorites, and I was kind of surprised about that. I thought it might be kind of middle of the road like I felt the first Revelations was, but no, I really like this one. I would love to see a Revelations 3, make it a trilogy, but who knows what they'll do with it in the future, if anything at all. Anyways, guys, let me know what you think of Resident Evil Revelations 2 down below. Would love to hear all your thoughts and opinions about it. Tell me what you think about Barry Burton and his character development, as well as any of the other characters in the game, the style, the gameplay, the aesthetics, anything that you want to share about it. Thanks for watching, guys. If you want to see more reviews on Resident Evil, I do have an entire Resident Evil playlist going through. I'm trying to play all of the mainline games that I can get my hands on, as well as review all of the animated stuff, so all of that is located there. Thanks as always for watching, guys. Give the video a like, comment, help it out in the algorithm. If you want support on a deeper level, I do have Patreon, channel memberships, and all that stuff linked down below. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll talk to you next time.
That was almost a Claire sandwich.
Barry, tell everyone that story.